Peace and love, y'all. I'm back with How to Decipher Poetic Justice, summarized. After creating over 7.5 hours of content with my How to Decipher Poetic Justice series, I've decided to do a little summary video for those that may still be on the fence about delving into all of this information. I'm going to try to move through this kind of fast, so if you want more of a breakdown, just go back and watch the series. In the first episode, How to Decipher Poetic Justice for Dummies, I took a strict look at just the lyrics to the song and nothing else. This is a sneak peek at the arguments I used from the lyrics to support the idea that this is not just a diss track, but that Kendrick got Drake to diss himself on this song. We pay particular attention to the 4 core language skills: speaking, writing, listening, and reading, as these are especially important in terms of communication, whether written or verbal. We're also going to point out the 5 senses when they show up in the lyrics. I'm going to highlight all of the references to different points I made in my video and provide a brief explanation. Starting with the intro, I believe Bad Bitch could be a reference to Drake, as he teased him with the same title later on in Euphoria. The go at the end of the intro could be associating Drake with the Chicago character from the Poetic Justice film, as go is a nickname for Chicago. The tone in the first part of the verse is very chivalrous. He starts the song off mentioning her fragrance, which is a sweet smell, and taste within the first 2 bars. That's 2 senses right off the bat. He's also referring to the speaking language skill with say shit. He highlights poetic justice with the first repetition mentioned in the song, followed by, if I told you that a flower bloomed in a dark room, would you trust it? There's more to this line, but for now, let's just point out how this line loosely relates to Tupac's The Rose That Grew from Concrete. He refers to the writing language skill with, I write poems in these songs, and the bar, when you're in the mood for empathy, it's blood in my pen, refers to the blood of Jesus and how his words are written in the Bible with red ink to signify the blood in the new covenant of Christianity. In the next half of the first verse, the tone shifts when he says, pour up plenty of champagne, cold nights when you curse this name. Our hypothesis with this line is that he's referring to Drake's Instagram name, Champagne Poppy. You called is another form of speaking, and I heard that represents hearing, which doubles as a language skill and one of the senses. Don't approach her with that Atari, that ain't good game, homie, sorry, starts the game motif that continues throughout Kendrick's career. In the first pre-hook, say refers to speaking, and I write refers to writing. His version of the pre-hook translates to using conversation to communicate to the people, and that he could never right his wrongs unless he wrote it down for real, means that he's already gone through the process of righting his wrongs through his writing. The entire chorus is just a flip of Janet Jackson's Anytime, Anyplace. But the message here is that you can get it. You can get got. You can be brought to justice at any time, in any place. He knows that poetic justice is what we want, so he put that in a song. All right. Now, as a point of order, we wholeheartedly believe that Kendrick wrote this verse for Drake to diss himself. It starts off with him being impatient, which is the exact opposite of the tone at the start of Kendrick's verse. He shows he lacks understanding when he says it don't make sense, and that could be pointing to the use of the senses in this diss. The young East African girl line could be referring to a scene in the Poetic Justice film when Chicago tells Lucky about an Ethiopian girl he was dating who was from Compton and had a son named Lamar. Drake continues the game motif with, I was trying to put you on game. Now, him going or taking anyone to the motherland is comical, but the irony is how Kendrick's trip to the motherland influenced the direction of his next album, To Pimp a Butterfly. The last few bars in this first half of the verse are evidence of how far Drake is willing to go to manipulate the situation. He's not even from the city where Poetic Justice, the film or the music video, takes place. In the second half of his verse, he refers to hearing in that sound like before repeating Poetic Justice in the same style as Kendrick did on his verse. Goddamn is the first instance of him using God's name in vain. He then repeats one of the bars from the first verse with, I write poems in these songs dedicated to, but his focus is on fun sex and his woman's looks. He then uses God in vain again with, good God, what you doing that walk for? When I see that thing move is an example of the sense of sight being used in the lyrics, and it could potentially be referring to Lauryn Hill's single Doo Wop That Thing, which is a popular rap song dedicated to righteousness. This is followed by wishing they would fight less and talk more, another reference to the speaking language skill. His pre-hook is focused on using communication to save relations, but he can never right his wrongs unless he writes them down for real. The difference in this pre-hook is that Drake is unable to right his wrongs, presently or in the future, unless he writes them down for real. And we all know about the accusations that Drake doesn't even write his songs. In Kendrick's third verse, he starts off with, I write, and then makes a potential reference to the game Taboo. He plainly confirms the efforts to dissect the lyrics when he says, every letter here is true. He repeats Poetic Justice for the third time, this time combining it with a speaking language skill when he says, I'm talking Poetic Justice. He then repeats the bar about the flower from the first verse. Next, he goes into another motif with, you need to hear this, highlighting love as not just a verb and comparing it to you looking in the mirror. This line is also when Kendrick references the sense of sight for the first time. As he closes out the song, he reiterates that love is not just a verb, this time describing it as you looking for it, maybe, before repeating again, you need to hear this. Love is not just a verb, distinguishing it this time saying that he sees power steering and sex driving when you swerve. He ends the verse saying he can hear your heartbeat before imploring you to use the language skill of reading to search these lines for gold mines. The last line starts similar to how you close a personal letter in Sincerely Yours Truly, right before threatening that you may go blind. The last verse closes just like the previous two with P.S. While it has caused a lot of controversy for the original founders and promoters of the Poetic Justice theory, Anthony and Desiree, this could be representing the initials for Pac Shakur. He wasn't usually referred to as Pac Shakur, but he definitely was known as Pac. This P.S. could be indicating that he was writing the lyrics for Pac. The song, after all, is named after the movie starring Pac and Janet Jackson. Now that we've taken a look at the lyrics to the song, let's move on to episode 2, Looking in the Mirror, where we focus on the visuals in the music video and how both the song and the music video are tied to the original film. Even if you make it past the song and are still skeptical if this is a diss, there's no way you can take a deep look at this music video and tell me there's nothing going on. There's way too many things I could point to as evidence that there's something mysterious being used in the music video. I'm going to breeze through everything as quickly as I can, so let's get it. Kicking it off, I wanted to highlight the fact that there were multiple signs and symbols to tip you off to the mischievousness that was going on. From the very first scene, we see a shot of the full moon, which could indicate that there's some lunacy happening. There's a car rolling through the party looking all creepy, and there's what looks like a hater early in the video wearing a hat that says college. Later on in the video, we see Drake's name on a cell phone caller ID. There's a guy turned the opposite way from everyone else with a hoodie on that says just begun. And at the end of the video, we see a Hunter ambulance. Now, at first glance, these points in the music video don't seem like they carry that much weight, but clearly, we know different. If you've seen the Poetic Justice film, you'll know that the music video takes place around the same neighborhood. Here, we have a daytime shot of the Crenshaw Square sign from the film, and the music video shows the same sign, but this time at night. Thinking back to what happened in the film, there were all types of shenanigans happening in the evening. Before we continue, I want to point out a disclaimer in the very beginning of the video that says, all characters in this visual are entirely fictional. The events that occur are purely symbolic and should not be taken literal. Very interesting to think about. Taking a look at the characters from the music video, we can see that they match up with the main characters from the film. Going clockwise from the top left, we have Kendrick's main love interest as Justice and Kendrick as Lucky. Drake's love interest represents Aisha, and obviously, Drake is Chicago. It's also important to note, Drake is the only character mentioned by name in the music video. During Kendrick's first verse, I couldn't help but notice all of the eye contact from Kendrick and his lady towards us. Even the moments where they were looking into each other's eyes were very impactful. Now, remember from the first episode, we talked about how the senses were used in the lyrics to the song? What we didn't touch on was that the only sense not mentioned in the lyrics was touch. This sense was reserved for the visuals in the music video, where we can see touch is used to continue the narrative against Drake. After Kendrick's verse, we see a flash across the screen that says enemigo, which is Spanish for enemy. As we transition to the first chorus, we see there is something that happened that caused the function to turn into complete chaos. We all can understand when you're out somewhere trying to have a good time and a fight breaks out or you hear someone let some shots off, it can immediately shift the vibes where everyone goes into survival mode and rushes to find safety. We see Kendrick moving towards something while everyone is moving away. Then we see a shot of the car from earlier looking like it's driving away from the function. As we go into Drake's verse, notice that there's a flash of an image across the screen when he says other man, and his verse shows a significant lack of touch between him and his love interest. She's playfully looking at us while he's talking in her ear, and when he's on the phone, she's on the other side of the bed. Thinking about how much eye contact we saw in the first verse, the eye contact Drake is showing in his verse is very much different. It's not confident and it doesn't look like he's being honest in what he says. I mean, they really got Drake out here looking crazy. Aside from that, we should note that Drake's verse is consistent with a lack of eye contact. I mean, he doesn't have one moment when he and his woman lock eyes. When we consider how Drake's pre-hook was portrayed in the music video, we can also see that there's an irony in the fact that he says, communication save relations, and he's leaving a voicemail because there's a lack of communication. He's also calling another woman while he's with someone else. Now, I wanted to take a brief look at something from the movie that I thought was very interesting. In the film, when they stop at a family reunion, they meet the Calendar sisters, Aunt April, Aunt May, and Aunt June, who was played by Dr. Maya Angelou. Dr. Angelou also played the woman elder on Good Kid, Mad City, who got them to repeat the prayer at the end of Dying of Thirst. She was also the writer for all of the poetry in the film, Poetic Justice. The sisters' names also coincide with Kendrick's major releases in the 2024 beef between him and Drake. This is just a hilarious coincidence if you ask me, especially because in the film, Aunt June was trying to school Chicago and Aisha about the meaning of real love. Looking back at the music video, after Drake's verse, we see a scene where everyone seems to be looking at the aftermath of what just happened at the function. There's some of the players in the scene who are giving us some eerie eye contact, including some of the homies from the LA hip-hop scene. There's also multiple instances where there are words in the wardrobe, similar to one of the characters from the film. That could be telling us something about the narrative in this story, especially the guy who's turned around wearing a hoodie that says, "Just begun." As we go into the last verse, we see another flash across the screen that says, "Love hurts," before an extended shot of Kendrick and his love interest slain in the street after they've been gunned down. This takes us into a discussion about how gun violence was a central theme that affected both of the main characters in the film. The opening scene shows Justice's former boyfriend being taken out at the drive-in, and Lucky's cousin was gunned down in the street right before they arrived in Oakland. The grief from losing her loved ones is what inspired one of the most pivotal scenes in the movie, Justice's mirror scene. Here's a clip of what I said about the scene, which inspired the title of my second episode, Looking in the Mirror. Now, to one of the most pivotal moments and memorable scenes in the movie. This scene lets you know how she's carrying the events from the movie's opening. While she's doing her best to keep it together, deep down you can tell she's really broken. The sounds of Stevie Wonder's Never Dreamed You'd Leave in Summer paint the emotions of this scene beautifully. You can tell that she's searching for something as she's looking at herself. She's not sure what she'll find or if she'll ever find it, but she can see there's something there that's gone. As we go further into the third verse, we see Kendrick and his love interest make a lot of eye contact with the camera. She's looking way more serious when she does it, and he's looking at us and looking away almost playfully, but coming back to the camera whenever there's a serious point to be made. At the end of the verse, we see Kendrick motion like he's giving himself a double headshot. This happens right at the time when he says, "right before you go blind," meaning right before someone cuts your lights out or turns your TV off. You know what I mean? In one of the last shots, we see the Hunter ambulance coming to attend to our fallen couple. I had to look deeper into why he would name it the Hunter ambulance. I found out that the mythical Hunter is associated with the constellation Orion. Because I'm familiar with astrology and Kendrick's natal chart, I was able to correlate that his sun placement was right on top of Orion when he was born. Because the sun represents your conscious ego in astrology, maybe this was a way for him to subtly pay homage to his ego. As the old idiom goes, you'd rather be the hunter than the hunted. The last thing I want to talk about in regards to the music video is the circular narrative. If you were paying attention, the story in the video goes from Kendrick and his love interest finding each other at the party to being slain in the street. One of the last shots in the music video after the ambulance pulls up rewinds back to the beginning of the video to show Kendrick and the homies laughing right before he and his lady first lock eyes. This time, it looks like they leave the party to go spend some time together by themselves. That's the circular narrative, where the characters seemingly go through something traumatic before starting back at the beginning with a better understanding that helps them to navigate the situation. Now, those were some of the main points I made associated with the Poetic Justice song and music video to confirm that this is a diss. As we move to episode 3, Seeds of Money Trees, we're going to take a look at everything else from that era that supported this stance between Kendrick and Drake. Before I go too far down the road, I must point out how I may have discovered that there are parallels with how Edgar Allan Poe approached conflict with the contemporaries of his time and how Kendrick went about becoming the best rapper of his generation. From a writing standpoint, you do have to admit that both of these artists are in a class all by themselves. I also figured there was a correlation between them because when you search Poe in Kendrick's catalog, you get the songs Poetic Justice and Poe Man's Dreams. Now, when I went back and looked at Drake's catalog, I found on the song The Resistance from his first album, he mentioned that he's 23 with a money tree. This made me instantly think about Kendrick's Money Trees, which is the track right before Poetic Justice on Good Kid, Mad City. Looking back at Poe Man's Dreams, it looks like Kendrick could be responding by saying he's 23 with morals and plans of living cordial. When we take a deeper look at some of the lyrics from The Resistance, I see a lot of foreshadowing to the same scenario from the Poetic Justice music video, where he's with a woman in his bed, but there's a whole other conversation with another woman going on in his phone. When you look at Kendrick's Poor Man's Dreams, he's describing his reasoning for wanting to get it right, so he can help the people closest to him live a better, more carefree life. That aligns with the sentiments from his first verse pre-hook on Poetic Justice, where he said, "I could never right my wrongs lest I write it down for real." As we move on to Buried Alive, I used some clips from YouTube channel Underground AT to help describe how this song was a diss towards Drake as well. AT pointed out in an interview from around that time that Kendrick describes the first meeting between him and Drake saying, "Sometimes you like a person's music, but you definitely don't like the actual artist when you sit down and you talk to them." That's a wild thing to say, if you ask me. Now, the first bar in this song says, "Looking in the mirror, I'm embarrassed." That is the start of a connection between a lot of songs from this era, and this mirror motif became a major part of the diss against Drake. One of the highlights of this video for me was a clip from YouTube channel Mother Rose. In this video, she talks about Drake's use of benevolent misogyny in Take Care. You have to check that video out if you haven't already. Next, we take a look at one of Kendrick's unreleased tracks from that era, Cartoon and Cereal. Even in the chorus to this song, he talks about looking in the mirror and realizing that he had something to prove. Moving on to the Heart Part 3, this track was released just a few days before the Good Kid, Mad City album dropped. There was a lot of foreshadowing in this track that I break down in this episode. Look towards the bottom at how he mentions thinking about being set up by Shireen, only for them to flip it full circle and set up her. When you take a look at the Good Kid, Mad City album, on the track Money Trees, he mentions that it go Holly Berry or Hallelujah, and money trees are the perfect place for shade. You usually find shade under a tree, and Poetic Justice is the next track under Money Trees in the album track list. Now, we already talked about Poetic Justice in the previous two episodes at this point, but what was special about episode 3 was that we looked at the lyrics through Genius.com and we included Kendrick's own annotations highlighted in yellow to consider what he had to say about his bars as well. Also, we pointed out how the blood in his pen connected with the mention of blood in the prayer as the blood of Jesus that saved him. Because this prayer was introduced at the very beginning of the album, only to be repeated at the climax of the story towards the end of the album, we have another example of the circular narrative within this project. So in addition to the Poetic Justice music video, we can consider the Good Kid, Mad City album as a circular narrative as well. The skit in the story at the end of the Poetic Justice song shows a shift in the story. The incident was foreshadowed at the end of the first track, which includes the prayer recited in the beginning. Him being jumped could be symbolic of Drake being dissed on this song, especially when you consider the line, "Where's you from, homie?" Kendrick did say on his first verse that ain't good game, homie. Sorry. As we move along past Good Kid, Mad City to Fucking Problems, notice how Kendrick ends his verse with Holly Berry, Hallelujah, just like he mentioned on Money Trees. With Drake's verse, which we accused of being ghost-written by Kendrick, we see him making a sexual reference to himself that could have hinted at him being compared to one of Edgar Allan Poe's rivals, Henry Longfellow. He really is a didactic knife. By the time we get to analyzing the Control verse, we see it in a different light than what we've ever seen before. While it is just a light shot at everyone else, it is a direct headshot at Drake from the very first line. He goes from hinting at his Funkmaster Flex freestyle to talking about being in a destruction mode if the gold exists. Remember the last pre-chorus from Poetic Justice, "Read slow and you'll find gold mines in these lines"? Machiavelli is also another nickname for Pac, and Pac was the male lead in Poetic Justice. I can see why Drake was mad, even though I would have definitely handled it differently. And that verse from the BET cipher was the straw that broke the camel's back. While the whole verse was jam-packed full of disses, it closes by declaring his opponent is scared to look in the mirror, bringing the mirror motif full circle in this era. We see how this motif was used across multiple tracks during this very short time frame. I mean, this is literally less than 2 years, and he kept on bringing it up for a reason. Now, my last video on this was just a culmination of everything. Not just who he was inside the beef, but everything he stands for outside of it as well. Fruit of the heart is what happens when you plant the right seeds. You're able to bear fruit that is nourishing to the soul. We start all the way back on the first project after he changed his stage name from K-Dot to Kendrick Lamar. He talks about comparing himself to Drake and wondering if he's really better than him because he's found more success. It's not insecurity, but more curiosity about how he can make it work to where he's getting recognized on that same level. His girl reassures him that he knows he's the best. He just has to keep at it and remain true to himself. That takes us into the Heart series. I use these different installments of the Heart to kind of guide the discussion in this fourth and final episode. Starting with the Heart Part 1, I established the Christian narrative in his music despite him asking us to ignore his religion. I believe he uses his faith to underline his music. Just look at the bars when he says, I believe if I fly, we all doves. I make a way for my people to see the light. Now, when I follow this up with a Bible verse about when Jesus was being baptized, witnesses say they saw the Spirit of God descending like a dove and alighting on him. That's a direct correlation. In the video, I used different Bible verses for each heart part to help me further explain the Christian narrative in his music. For example, on the Heart Part 2, when he says, your enemies was to pray and now you pray to God, I pray these bars get farther than Compton. This could be expressed in Proverbs 4:23 when it says, above all else, guard your heart, for everything you do flows from it. You guard or defend yourself against your enemies. And just as your bars flow from the mic to the speakers, everything you do flows from your heart. On the Heart Part 3, he talks about when the whole world sees you as Pac reincarnated, that's enough pressure to make you just open the book of David. While there is no book of David, you do have to go through the Bible to get to David's story. With this Bible verse, I chose to highlight Romans 10:9, where it says, if you declare with your mouth Jesus is Lord and believe in your heart that God raised him from the dead, you will be saved. This played out in the Good Kid, Mad City album directly when he says in the prayer, I believe that Jesus is Lord. I believe that you raised him from the dead. Again, this prayer was used to bookend the circular narrative in the album's story. In the Heart Part 4, he talks about being a prophet in his songs, and how even after all of his success, his legend is associated with him being seen as a savior of hip-hop. Shout out to Glasses Malone for being a responsible influence to Dot and others during the time when they were coming up in the rap game. For the Bible verse associated with Part 4, I use Luke 6:43-45 because it talks about the type of fruit that a tree bears according to whether it is good or bad. And just as a tree is recognized by the fruit it bears, men bring out the things stored up in their heart, good or evil. For the mouth speaks what the heart is full of. When we get to the Heart Part 5, there's a section where I feel like he's channeling the late great Nipsey Hussle to describe how he feels now that he's no longer on this plane with us. He wants us to know that because of all the good that he did when he was alive, he's in heaven. Taking a look at Ephesians 3:16-19, we hear a prayer that you being rooted and established in love may have power, together with all the Lord's holy people, to grasp how wide and long and high and deep is the love of Christ, and to know this love that surpasses knowledge, that you may be filled to the measure of all the fullness of God. Powerful stuff. As we transition to the Heart Part 6, I want to capture the spirit of this song as we continue with this summary. This song is basically a look back at the time when Kendrick and his team were grinding to make it happen in the rap game. It specifically calls back to the previous Hearts in the series when he says, "Put my heart on display." When talking about his split from his former label, TDE, he says that he can be the demonstration for how to conduct differences with a healthy conversation. This calls back to the line from the pre-hook on his first verse of Poetic Justice, where he says, "They say conversation rule a nation." With the Bible verse associated with part 6, Galatians 5:22 through 23, we see that these examples of the fruit of the Spirit are in alignment with justice because against such things there is no law. Now, in the spirit of the Heart Part 6, we're going to take a look back at all of the previous projects since Good Kid, Mad City to see how they tie into this poetic justice theory. In the lyrics to Poetic Justice, he says, "I write poems in these songs dedicated to you." In To Pimp a Butterfly, there are select tracks where we hear pieces of a poem being recited as interludes in these songs. When we get to the end of the album, we hear the poem recited in its entirety and we hear that the poem is being read to Tupac. After they have a brief conversation, Kendrick reads him another poem about a caterpillar pimping a butterfly for its own benefit. I believe this is a story where Kendrick is the caterpillar and Drake is seen as the butterfly being pimped. In the process of Kendrick pimping Drake to his own benefit, he becomes a butterfly and his position in the rap game sheds new light on his experiences. At the end of the poem, when he asked Pac what was his perspective on that, Pac didn't respond. I believe this was because Tupac was the original caterpillar that got pimped by the industry. He never had the opportunity to become a butterfly. It makes sense when you consider one of the original titles of the album was To Pimp a Caterpillar, or 2PAC for Tupac. Now, as we move along to Damn, we notice how this album is also an example of the circular narrative, and there's themes of the story being rewound or put in reverse. Before we go down that road, I wanted to point out one of the literary devices used in a lot of Kendrick's writing. Shout out to the shooters for highlighting Kendrick's use of anaphora with a lot of the repetition in his lyrics. In doing this research, I also found out that anaphora was the name of the central prayer in the Eucharist or Holy Communion. This is what many Christians use to commemorate Jesus' new covenant established at the Last Supper. Kendrick used a visual representation of the Last Supper in his Humble music video, when he was seated at a red table filled with bread and wine. As we go back to look at the narrative in Damn, we hear on the opening track, Blood, that Kendrick comes in contact with a blind woman while taking a walk the other day. She seems to be looking for something, but ultimately tells Kendrick that he has lost his life before hearing a gunshot go off. Now, you can do your research, but it is widely known that a blind woman represents Lady Justice. And with how the narrative in the album played out, the last track hears a gunshot before it rewinds all the way back to the beginning of the album, and we hear him say he was taking a walk the other day, just as before. Now, to me, that sounds like poetic justice. When looking at Mr. Morale and the Big Steppers, I wanted to highlight the mirror theme that ties into the whole album, as well as the new Oklahoma moniker and what it represents. Shout out to the Dissect podcast for showing how the track list in this project can be mirrored where the reverse track list on disc 2 lines up with the disc 1. For example, Mirror is a mirrored track of United in Grief. Mr. Morale is a mirror of Worldwide Steppers, etc. When we look at the meaning of Oklahoma, we hear that it is a Choctaw translation of a phrase used in the Bible where a prophet is addressing God's people on God's behalf. He literally named himself my people after the way this indigenous tribe addresses God's people. I am all of us. Fast forward to breaking down the bars in the beef of 2024, he dropped one of the biggest songs in rap history. Not like us. I don't have much else to say after that. When we get to GNX, we see that this could be representing the getaway car and the victory lap. This black car symbol is prominently displayed multiple times in the Poetic Justice music video. At the beginning of the video with the Shireen instrumental in the background, at the start of the Poetic Justice track in the video, and at the end of the chorus before Drake's verse as a getaway car after the shooting incident. The victory lap is him performing at the Super Bowl. He literally pushed the red button with this one, for real. He opened the show on top of the GNX and used a lot of the tracks from the album in this performance, even as he was calling back to aspects of Poetic Justice. Here is a depiction of what happened after the Enemigo screen flash in the Poetic Justice music video, right when all of the chaos in the chorus ensued. Anytime you can get it, at any place, I know just what you want. Poetic Justice, put it in a song. This is the culmination of the game motif that was mentioned on Poetic Justice. He literally is as big as the Super Bowl. Game over. Now that's the end of this story. I wanted to take a moment to kind of explain the thumbnails with each episode in the video. The first two center shots came from the third verse in the Poetic Justice music video. The background of episode 1 shows the separation between Drake and his love interest. The center shot is illuminated by flames, as this is the pose he makes when he's talking about hearing her heartbeat. The center shot of episode 2 is when he says, right before you go blind, which goes along with using the visuals in this episode to explain the theory. The background shows a shot from Glasses Malone in the Poetic Justice music video on the right. To loosely paraphrase his Threads bio, Glasses helps you see. On the left, we have a shot of Pac and Janet from the Poetic Justice film. This shot represents how eye contact was used in the film to portray different emotions, similar to the use of eye contact in the music video. The third episode thumbnail shows Edgar Allan Poe and a deranged Kendrick in the background, highlighting how crazy this man potentially is, and similar to Poe, how far he's willing to go to gain notoriety. The centerpiece from this episode is from the Squabble Up video, where he's reading a book titled How to Be More Like Kendrick for Dummies. The centerpiece to the episode 4 thumbnail uses a shot from the Not Like Us music video at the end when he asks, "Are you my friend?" as he's waving to the camera. The left part of the background is from the Super Bowl performance, where I believe he's calling back to the man down extended shot from the start of the third verse in the music video for Poetic Justice. We juxtapose that with the right part of the background, which is from the N95 music video, where it looks like Kendrick is at a beach shore suspended on an invisible crucifix, in the image of Jesus Christ. This ties into the Christian narrative presented in this episode that is present throughout all of Kendrick's catalog. For the summary thumbnail, I wanted to tie this all back into the love aspect of the song. I used a screenshot of the end of the music video where Kendrick and his love interest are in a warm embrace. There are aspects of Poetic Justice that does represent love, but it's a deep spiritual love, not just a verb. And to the point that this love is worth defending, worth fighting for, I used a clip from Kendrick's 2026 Grammy night, where his fist is taped up as if he's ready to continue the fight. You can't say you haven't been warned.